Okay, hey everyone. Today we're going to talk about how to get ISO 19650 compliant in 60 days. Are you ready for this? I maybe not as ready as this guy here, but let's get going. So there are three parts that we're going to go through. The first is the boring part, a bit more background on ISO 19650, process maps to simplify things, lots of resources, identifying gaps and identifying how the opportunity to improve your efficiencies through different tool sets. Then we'll get into the software bit, talk a bit more about Plannerly and how it can help. And then the part that's really exciting is that tailored program that in 60 days, we promise that we can not only support you to get certified, but also continuously support you through the non-conformances and improving efficiencies at your company as well. I read that standard, the ISO 19650 standard, so many times. And every time I got more of an understanding. It was easier to interpret and understand what I should do from it. But then I had to implement and I had to communicate this with lots of other people in companies that I was working at. And it wasn't so easy to do that. So we've seen loads of companies struggling, and we don't think that it has to be that way. We want to provide it as a more simple and step-by-step approach so that teams can actually rapidly implement and get more efficient. And we believe that that is possible. So let me show you how. At the end of this session, you should have a core understanding of ISO 19650, a practical approach, and overall, as a result, you'll be able to boost your company's efficiency and also win new business. So let's take a look at these three parts. The three parts, the first part, the boring part, let's get started with that. I say the boring part, but it's essential. We need to understand what ISO 19650 is. We've got some really good resources there. We've got some quick intro videos and a lot of detailed process maps to help you explain that to others. We've got some really quick and easy steps to identify compliance gaps and then how to implement your processes in a better way on your projects so you can get real use of the ISO 19650 workflows and get them implemented in an audit process. We've got lots of tools and resources for you to share with your teams as well. Let's get into this section. So to level set, ISO 19650, it's an international standard for managing information, and it's the exchange of information across all of the different stages in a project, from the initial concept through to renovating a project downstream. And it's any type of project. It doesn't matter what type of built asset it is. It could be a road, it could be a building, it could be a swimming pool. And the framework is all about collaborative information exchange. So defining the rules so that everyone talks the same language. If you want to get an understanding of it, there's a video here we'll share in the links. 5 minutes, a real opportunity to get an understanding of that very quickly and something to share with your teams. ISO 19650 starts off with a whole bunch of stuff, from managing roles and understanding their interaction with others and setting up an understanding of what an organization wants and the purpose of creating this information, how to then go through the definition of structured information exchanges so that you can contract for them, all the way through all of these different parts of the workflow. We've done the hard work to boil this down into a very simple process map. An overview here showing the 8 different steps, from assessment and need through to tendering, appointing, and right the way through delivery and closeout. The first part of this workflow is defining the exchange information requirements. The second part is responding and agreeing through the supply chain, through the lead and appointed parties, what and who is going to do exactly what level of information required at what point in time, for what purpose, and putting that into contracts. And then we go through the actual production of information, the verification of information, and the more that we can automate this using things like the information delivery specification from Building Smart, allows us to really put the onus on the teams delivering, rather than a lot of management and arduous steps in that workflow that tend to take a lot of time and don't really give BIM and information management a good name. So all about automating this and then learning from it at the end. So the first step is about identifying compliance gaps for your company. That process starts from understanding what's even required for your company, because the whole ISO 19650 workflow is actually applicable to many teams in that set of stages that we looked at. So you have to determine what's important to you, what requirements apply to your company. You'll go through an internal assessment to understand how you actually adhere to those today. And then understanding those gaps give you an opportunity to fill them potentially with templates, refinements in processes, updates in training, and really getting everyone up to speed and talking that same language. When you go through this process, you'll review and ask us about this. We've done this a lot with companies to understand what the gaps are or what the opportunities are to improve. And you identify these discrepancies in order to be able to make sure that we know what we need to do to get to that compliance. And that could be as simple as understanding that today we call something a register of requirements. And in the ISO workflow, it's actually called the asset information requirements. And that correlation, once we understand it, we can really put practice along the lines of the ISO 19650 workflow, and everyone talks the same language. A lot of the steps that you're doing today are actually transferable, and it's not a completely different way of working. It's actually quite aligned, and it's a more structured framework to the approach that you do today. Once you've got an understanding of where the gaps are, we go about setting really smart objectives, training people through that workflow, and aligning your overall strategic implementation. There are a lot of tools that we use as well. They range from this type of information in a series of webinar videos that can really boost the knowledge of your teams. They also include lots of frameworks with project management tools and automating the quality assurance processes, increasing the amount of communication, information exchange, understanding when and who should do what, really applying a lot more structure to that process and understanding who should do what from your team and how they interact with others. But it's more than just saying that you do ISO 19650. So we really support those teams to have the training, the education, monitoring, making sure that you're getting effectiveness. It's not just saying you do it, it's actually getting the efficiencies from that workflow. That's the most important part. Once you have started to understand where your gaps are and you bring in your organizational change management, whether you have leadership that are interested or an innovation team that is pushing this, you really need to get those teams involved, foster the collaboration between them, and set up a change management process so that that is really smooth rather than an unexpected and an unwanted set of updates in people's workflows. We have lots of strategies for that continuous improvement when we talk about lean and continuous improvement throughout your processes and understanding your development and in understanding your key performance indicators in order to be able to implement this and then measure. We really promote a smart, measurable approach, and some of those metrics that we can implement with you are refined on a monthly basis and understood so you can see how you're doing compared to what you set out to do in the first place. We have lots of training as well. So the training side of things can be cumbersome. We don't want you to have to reinvent the wheel. We have everything from the basics through the advanced and expert level. The expert level training gives you access to a plethora of resources which help you understand how to create everything from an EIR, a PIR, an OIR, an AIR, a BEP, all of these 3-letter acronyms, and also all of the 4-letter acronyms as well. We'll really cover all of those bases, so no need to create a whole bunch of training material yourself. We've got you covered there. We also understand that this is about applying international standards. So Building Smart has fantastic sets of international standards for talking the same language using the Building Smart Data Dictionary, BSDDs, and also the IDS, the Information Delivery Specification, to be able to exchange requirements. These are really, really fundamental principles, and we can share more, not just in the training, but also structured tools to be able to help implement those pieces. There are also frameworks, one of them, the level of information need concepts, which again, really important to define a purpose and connect that right the way through to the deliveries for exchange of information. Really difficult maybe if you're using spreadsheets to do that. So we've got a really structured way to adhere to this workflow and make it a lot easier. Following through to the handover of information, Kobe made easy. Lots of these are resources that you can implement. Also preparation for and training, getting understanding of what even the audit process is. How do you go through that? What does it mean for your company? What evidence do you have to provide? All of these things are really important to understand. And then the certification process, what does that look like? How do you go through proving that you're doing this on projects? We've got really good relationships with some of these certification bodies as well. So that really gives you a boost to know what to expect. We prepare you and we get you in that shape so that you're ready and you're confident. We also support you with any non-conformances as well as you go through that process. So the level of information need framework is a real key for understanding the exchange of information. Who needs to do what at what point in time? Why is it important? Level of detail, level of definition, level of development were parts of that workflow originally. Level of information need takes that a whole bunch of stages further, where it's about defining clearly from a purpose right the way through the different steps to support better decision making between everyone. And that framework of level of information need encompasses all the prerequisites. So why do we need the information? When's it required? What milestone? Who's the actor who provides the information? What's the object? Potentially, is it a piece of geometry? Is it a piece of information that's attached to geometry? Is it not attached? Is it a document? What is the detail of that? Is it just a symbol somewhere, or is it fabrication level required? Right the way through, what is the reliability of that information that's required? What is the accuracy? How does it appear? What's the material potentially? What is the information? Is there a rule that defines how that value for that information is defined? What are the really important parts? And in defining this framework, it's an important part of that workflow. So let's take a practical approach at some of these pieces. The first part in level of information need is a purpose. So defining why something is required. Here we have a structural estimate, MEP coordination, and asset handover as milestones. And then we need to understand what the scope is that's required for these parts of the workflow. Here is a list of scope that we potentially might need at each of these milestones. That doesn't just include elements and BIM. It's also about other things, project tasks. Here, when do you appoint the information manager? Who's going to define the EIR? Who has to sign up to it? And all of those requirements are defined in a grid. So you start to understand here, we've got structural requirements for an estimate, but maybe those requirements are only needed in 2D. Later, we would need 3D elements for some kind of coordination. And maybe at asset handover, later in the project, at handover of certain parts of that workflow, of the different stages in the project, you might need less geometry. So you might not need all of the runs, but you might need the end conditions, and you might need a lot of information on some of these for maintenance. So being able to define these clearly in work packages and then see who's responsible. So not just one team is responsible for one thing throughout the whole project. It might be early on that the architecture team is responsible for defining some information for structural, and then maybe the structural team is responsible later for some of the coordination. And seeing who's responsible, and if that responsibility hands over, is incredibly important. Defining that level of information need and also the actors at the right time. So defining geometry, information, documentation, the notes, the attachments, the information about links out to other sources, checklists, things that you need to define a certainty on so that you can agree that it's complete. Who's responsible, who's accountable, who's informed, who's consulted through that process. All of these aspects are incredibly important in a framework like this. And we might need to attach additional information, whether they are links to things, descriptions of things, videos that explain how to achieve this task. All of these, actually, we have templates for you. So if that's something that you want, get in touch with us and we'll share all of these templates that you can take through and make sure you're checking off the things that you need to do and understanding exactly how they're done as well. So going through that framework and understanding level of information need to be able to define the purpose through to the geometry, the information, and the documentation required. That is a big part of the ISO 19650 workflow. So let's talk a bit about the software side of things. These are processes that are assisted by having good tools in place. There are many different tools that you can use to get some of these things done. What we see is being able to have resources that are based on templates, quickly creating. Here we've got an example of smart fields that automate the process of document creation. And then the ability to have multiple secure documents with a permission-based and an approval-based workflow. So following that in progress, shared and published, understanding who has access, who can edit, who can change it, who's responsible for completing those things. That's the whole workflow from a resources and a documentation perspective. And we also see this definition, as we saw in the level of information need aspects, the requirement to define responsibility for everything from your master information delivery plans to your responsibility matrices down to the detail of who does what, how much it's done, what information is required, what the status is for these aspects. All of this is really clearly defined so that you can autonomously check the deliverables. Instead of waiting until somebody submits a model, somebody checks it and says, no, that's not quite right, I'm going to give you all of the things that are wrong with it. We really want much more proactive opportunities, and that's what the Building Smart Data Dictionary, along with the information delivery specification, to define something in a structured way that we can automate and have autonomous quality checking. What we mean by autonomous checking is that we put it in the hands of the teams that are submitting the work so that you actually are certain that you're going to get a good result rather than wait until you create the report and then send it back and say that there are lots of issues that you need to then fix. So that autonomous workflow is important. And then what else is important is understanding all of these different resources. It can be challenging because they're in lots of different places. So we need to have a CDE or integrated CDEs along with, we believe, automated file naming that you can see that automates that workflow based on metadata, sorting, searching, filtering, automating that workflow, and having an approval-based workflow so that you can get some really smart contracts with e-signature and using that to tie people into that contract, but also giving them the autonomous QA to be able to really make those updates as well. So the software part is all about how do you fit to the framework of ISO 19650, which is combination of a bunch of how-tos, but also the framework for the level of information need definition, and then tying that through in a way that's practical for other teams to implement, understanding how you can share that using information delivery specifications from Building Smart, and making that as easy as possible, we believe, in this stoplight system so that teams, when they are submitting their work, they can make sure that they're achieving what they have said and what they've contracted to do. So in this workflow, we've promised to explain and also share some tools and some resources. There's lots of videos and links there. But what we also support, and something that makes it really simple and really structured, is the solution to get your company compliant in 60 days. Let's take a quick look at that. So we understand that many companies struggle to implement ISO 19650. So making it a 3-step simple system to get compliant and demonstrate that you're compliant, boost your reputation with that and win more work, we think that that is important. What's great about that is that we've seen auditors even tell us that being able to audit a company that's using Planoly is a dream. So hopefully this can be part of your workflow and make it easier. How this works? Well, we don't think it needs to be overwhelming. We think that these 3 steps, the first one, in the first 2 weeks, we identify the gaps in your workflow. We get you up to speed fast. We take you through the training that's required, and we give you this strong framework for your compliance. Step 2 is all about getting audit ready. So weeks 3 through 6, we increase the amount of training. It's not just the basics, but it's also through the expert level, understanding how to define the requirements and workflows and put your plan into action. This is really detailed, making sure that we're supporting you, not just in the how-to, but also in the tools and improvements to technology. This is a 2-way workflow. We've worked with a lot of companies now that are giving us great feedback that keep improving the software tools that are available to you. This includes brief check-ins that are regular to make sure that we're fixing things, adjusting things, improving things, and making sure that it's as easy, as plain sailing for you as possible. And then through weeks 7 and 8, we book your audit and we help you solve all of the non-conformances. So through this process, the step 2 and 3, we're actually sharing with you what to expect in that audit and what you can do to make sure that you're really prepared for it. We get you involved with the right auditors, and we also support you through those non-conformances. People say great things about what the tools and the processes are, but I think that that's the benefit. That's what we're really looking to do, is to combine processes, combine tools, combine support, combine the knowledge and know-how and templates into something that makes your life a lot easier. And it gives you the opportunity to spend time on the things that actually matter to you. The overall investment, you can connect with us and understand more about this, but it can be a monthly or an annual subscription. And we don't just support you in the first 60 days, we support you continuously year after year as well. It's a really great way to get that compliance without the hassle. There's a lot more that we can share, but if you want to, please book some time with us. I really, really relish the opportunity to share more about what we can do to help you. So that's it. We have this 3-step simple system that you can adopt so that you can get rapidly compliant and demonstrate it, boost your reputation and win more work. That's the process that we take you through. It's a really, really instrumental change in our industry. We have the opportunity as an industry to improve, and the ISO 19650 workflow really gives us that framework to be able to do this. There are some really big steps that you need to take. The training to get understanding of where your gaps are and to improve them, and then go through that audit and certification process. But it's not just about the checkbox. It's not about getting certified and just continuing as usual. This is an opportunity, I really believe, for our industry to take a massive efficiency boost. Please understand that. Please see how you can involve the right people inside of your companies. Please understand how you can make your tool sets more efficient, dedicated on information management, and being able to review and simplify that from a process perspective is really the key part of that. But if you don't have your people bought in, if you don't have your executive level teams bought in, it's going to probably be more difficult than it should be. We have a great business case template that embarks on this journey that helps you to this implementation, this solution, this opportunity to make it easier. Let us know if you would like to get access to that. Thanks so much for your attention. We'd love to share more. Let us know what we can do with you. We love this industry, so anything you can share that will help us improve is greatly received. Looking out for you at the BIM Coordinator Summit, whether you're online or in person. We'll see